The gavel cracked like thunder in Orleans Parish criminal court, and Rick's face crumbled like day-old cornbread. 10 years, Mr. Carlton. I sat in the front row, Daddy's restored purple heart pinned to my black blazer, watching this man who'd slept in my father's bed finally face consequences. He'd forged Mama's signature on $56,000 worth of loans, gambling it away at underground spots in Treme, while she worked double shifts at Gentilly Elementary. The bailiff moved toward him, chains ready, and Rick locked eyes with me one final time. Pure hatred mixed with disbelief radiated from his bloodshot stare. "You destroyed your own mama's marriage," he spat, voice cracking on the last word. I touched the metal on my chest, feeling the weight of Daddy's sacrifice against my heart, and let the smallest smile touch my lips. Nah. I saved my daddy's legacy. The courtroom erupted in whispers, but I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes locked on Rick as the reality of Angola State Penitentiary settled into his bones. Mama sat 3 rows behind me, silent as a ghost. She'd made her choice when she finally signed the divorce papers last week, her signature shaky but real this time. Rick's lawyer, some slick brother from Metairie who'd promised him probation, gathered his papers with the defeated energy of a man who knew he'd been outplayed from the start. My own attorney, Mr. Morrison, Granddaddy's college roommate from Dillard, squeezed my shoulder once. "Your daddy would be proud, baby girl." The words hit different than I expected, sharp and sweet at the same time, like the first sip of Granddaddy's homemade muscadine wine. But to understand how I ended up in that courtroom with my father's medal and my mother's tears, we have to rewind 17 years to when I was 20 years old with a fresh Howard University acceptance letter and a house about to go into foreclosure. Hurricane Katrina had taken our neighborhood and cancer had taken Daddy, leaving Mama with a half-rebuilt shotgun house on Pogger Street, and bills that multiplied like roaches in a dark kitchen. I'd been the one who sat across from Mr. Morrison back then, wearing my ROTC uniform and carrying documents I barely understood, co-signing that mortgage with a clause my military contract law professor helped me write. "Any property transfer during your active duty requires your written consent, Shanice," Professor Williams had said, circling the paragraph with her red pen. "Don't ever forget you have this protection." I'd served 6 years, came home with an honorable discharge and a job offer from a federal auditing firm in D.C. My apartment in Shaw had floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, and absolutely nothing that reminded me of Rick Carlton. I'd been tracking federal contractor compliance, catching senators' nephews padding invoices, the kind of work that required attention to detail and a stomach for rich folks' creative accounting. Every 2 weeks I'd call Mama, and every 2 weeks she'd mention Rick's name a little more, his laugh a little louder in the background. When the wedding invitation came 5 years ago with cheap cardstock and misspelled words, I'd sent a check for $300 and my regrets. I should have known better. I should have known that a man who misspells commitment on his own wedding invitation wasn't committed to nothing but himself. The call about Granddaddy came on a Wednesday, while I was reviewing a defense contractor's books that didn't add up. Mama's voice was paper-thin, barely holding itself together. "Your Granddaddy passed, Shanice. Jazz funeral's on Saturday. You need to come home, baby." I'd almost said no. Would've if she hadn't added the words that made my stomach drop. "You need to see this with your own eyes." I booked the flight that night, my supervisor giving me that look that said she understood. The plane from Reagan National to Louis Armstrong took 3 hours, 3 hours to remember why I'd stayed away so long. New Orleans in October still carried that wet heat, that specific humidity that made your clothes stick and your edges sweat no matter how much eco-styler you used. I rented a car and drove through the 7th Ward, past the corner stores where we used to buy pickles in a bag, past the church where Daddy's own jazz funeral had second line down Claiborne. The shotgun house on Pogger Street looked wrong even from a distance. The garden Daddy had planted with Creole tomatoes and mirlitones was gone, replaced with gravel and a rusted-out barbecue pit. The shutters he'd painted periwinkle blue, Mama's favorite color, were now flat black. Even the cast iron fence he'd restored piece by piece looked neglected, overtaken by weeds nobody bothered to pull. I parked across the street and sat there, engine running, AC blasting, studying what used to be home. Rick's truck dominated the driveway, one of those massive Ford F-250s with thin blue line stickers despite him never serving a day as police or military. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant back in D.C. A reminder that the forensic accountant's report was due Monday. I was good at my job, real good, had caught a $12 million embezzlement scheme last year that made the Washington Post. Numbers didn't lie, and they always left trails if you knew where to look. That's what Professor Williams had taught me. Follow the money and you'll find the truth. The front door opened before I could knock, and Mama stood there looking 10 years older than her 61 years. Gray had taken over her temples, and she'd lost weight in that unhealthy way that spoke of stress and skipped meals. Shanice, baby. Her hug felt obligatory, like she was going through motions she'd practiced. You're so thin. They don't feed you up in D.C.? I stepped inside and the smell hit me first, cigarettes and Old Spice and something else, something like slow rot. The hardwood floors Daddy had refinished on his hands and knees were scuffed and dull, covered in spots with cheap area rugs that didn't match. The hallway where our family photos used to create a timeline of love and life was now decorated with Rick's hunting trophies. Dead eyes of deer and ducks staring at nothing. Look who finally decided to show up. Rick's voice boomed from the living room, that particular volume of a man who needed everyone to know he existed. He sat in Daddy's recliner, the one Mama had saved for because Daddy's back had been messed up from carrying supply packs in Iraq, but Rick had reupholstered it in camouflage fabric that made my stomach turn. Rick Carlton looked exactly like I remembered, mid-50s going on 70, beer gut testing the limits of his LSU shirt, that permanent sneer of someone who thought the world owed him something. The prodigal daughter returns, he added, taking a long pull from his Abita bottle. The next 2 days moved like a fever dream. Granddaddy's jazz funeral with the second line and the brass band playing Just a Closer Walk with Thee, while I walked behind the casket in heels that tore up my feet. Mama cried into Rick's shoulder, and he played the dutiful husband for the cameras, but I watched him check his phone every 5 minutes, his leg bouncing with that particular energy of a man jonesing for something. The repast was at the house, and that's when I started seeing it, really seeing it. Grandmama's good china was gone, replaced with paper plates from the dollar store. The antique sideboard where we used to display Mardi Gras king cake babies had disappeared. Even Daddy's workbench in the shed was empty, just an oil stain on the concrete where his toolbox used to sit. I found Mama in the kitchen trying to make potato salad with ingredients that didn't include Creole mustard or enough eggs. Mama, where's Grandmama's china? The set with the gold rim? She didn't turn around, kept chopping celery with shaky hands. Oh baby, we had some financial troubles last year. Had to sell some things. Rick appeared in the doorway, bourbon courage making him bold. Your mama means I took care of business while you were up north playing corporate. Something in his tone made the hairs on my neck stand up, that same intuition Daddy used to call my spirit talking. What kind of financial troubles? I kept my voice level professional, the tone I used when I was about to catch someone in a lie during audits. Rick stepped closer, bourbon fumes overwhelming the smell of Mama's under-seasoned potato salad. Taxes, insurance, repairs. This house costs money, something you wouldn't know about since you abandoned your mama. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, showed him the automatic transfer I'd been sending Mama every month for 5 years. For $100 that should have more than covered her portion of utilities and food. I've sent over $24,000 since you got married. Where'd that money go? The silence in that kitchen was heavy enough to crush bones. Mama's knife stopped moving, her back rigid as a corpse. Rick's face cycled through confusion to anger to something worse, calculation. Your mama used that for personal things. Ain't none of your business. But I was already texting my assistant, asking her to pull the property records for 1247 Pogger Street, and what she sent back 30 minutes later made my hands shake. The house had been refinanced 18 months ago for $87,000. My name wasn't on the new loan, but it should have required my signature to modify anything because of that clause from 17 years ago. I found Rick in the shed, smoking a black and mild and scrolling through something on his phone that he quickly closed when I walked in. We need to talk about the refinancing. His shoulders tensed. Don't know what you're talking about. I showed him my phone, the county records, the loan documents, all of it. You forged Mama's signature and somehow got around my cosigner protection. That's fraud, Rick. Federal fraud. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound harsh and mean in the small space. Prove it. Your mama signed everything. She wanted that money for home improvements. The improvements were nowhere to be found, But what I did find over the next 6 hours of searching, with Mama gone to her sister's and Rick passed out drunk in his recliner, was a paper trail that told a story uglier than I'd imagined. Receipts from Harrah's Casino, betting slips from the fairgrounds, credit card statements showing cash advances at places called Lucky 7 and Royal Flush. There were pawn shop tickets for items I recognized: Daddy's dress uniform, his Bronze Star, his dog tags, each marked sold, never reclaimed. I found garage sale logs in Rick's handwriting, itemized lists of what he'd sold and for how much: Grandmama's carnival ball gown for $35, Daddy's hand tools for $70, my childhood artwork for $5 a box. He'd kept meticulous records for tax purposes, never imagining they'd become evidence. The deed transfer was in a folder marked important, and that's when I saw it. Mama's signature didn't match her real handwriting. The loops were wrong, the pressure uneven. But worse was what I found in the final folder. Current bills showing the house was 4 months behind on the new mortgage, property taxes unpaid, and a notice from the city about code violations Rick had ignored. He was going to lose this house, Daddy's house, the house I'd co-signed for. The house that held every memory of a man who'd served his country and loved his family and deserved better than this. The gavel cracked like thunder in Orleans Parish criminal court, and I watched Rick's face crumble. But this time I saw it different, clearer. This wasn't just about the money or the forged signatures or even the medals he'd pawned. This was about a man who'd moved into my father's house, slept in my father's bed, sat in my father's chair, and thought he could erase Shanice Baptiste like he'd never existed. The bailiff moved forward with handcuffs, and Rick's lawyer, that slick brother from Metairie, made one last weak objection that Judge Thompson dismissed with a wave. 10 years, Mr. Carlton, and you'll be paying restitution for every item you sold, every document you forged, every dollar you stole. My addition to Mr. Morrison's case had been the key. I tracked down every single person who'd bought something at Rick's garage sales using old neighborhood Facebook groups and next-door posts, and I'd bought it all back, every piece. Some folks gave me family items for free once I explained what Rick had done, others I paid double what they'd spent, but I'd gotten back Daddy's tools, Grandmama's china, even 3 of my childhood paintings that Mrs. Chun from 2 blocks over had bought because she remembered me winning that art contest in 5th grade. But my signature move, the thing that sealed Rick's fate beyond the fraud and forgery, was what I'd discovered buried in his browsing history on the computer he'd been too drunk to password protect. Rick had been running a side scheme, using Daddy's veteran status to apply for benefits and grants meant for disabled vets, pocketing $17,000 over 3 years from programs designed to help heroes. I'd handed that evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office personally, watched the federal prosecutor's face harden when she read through it. Ms. Baptiste, this is stolen valor adjacent, and fraud against veteran services. We'll make sure he pays. The judge had stacked the federal charges on top of the state ones, and that's how 7 years became 10. After the sentencing, I spent 6 weeks in New Orleans doing what Rick couldn't, restoring. I hired Daddy's old Army brothers, men who'd served with him in Iraq and came home to become contractors and carpenters, and men who remembered what Shanice Baptiste's house was supposed to look like. We rebuilt the bookshelves he destroyed, refinished the cypress floors, replanted the garden with Creole tomatoes and mirlitones from starts Mama's sister had been keeping alive. I tracked down Daddy's Purple Heart through a pawn shop network, paid $800 to get it back from a collector in Baton Rouge who didn't want to let it go until I showed him Daddy's photo. His Bronze Star came back from a military memorabilia shop in Slidell, and his dog tags I found on eBay, of all places, sold by someone who had no idea they were selling a piece of my heart. Mama signed the new deed with Mr. Morrison present, new provisions protecting her from ever being used again. Her signature shaky but determined. She filed for divorce the same day, in the same courthouse where Rick got sentenced, a poetic justice that wasn't lost on anyone. The house on Pogger Street stood restored by Mardi Gras season, every detail exactly as Daddy had built it, and Mama hosted her first second line in 5 years, neighbors flooding in to celebrate the return of Shanice Baptiste's legacy. I stood on the porch watching the brass band pass, watching Mama laugh for the first time in years, and touched the purple heart I'd pinned to my jacket. My phone buzzed with a message from my supervisor in D.C. asking when I was coming back, but I wasn't ready yet. I had one more thing to do. I drove to Angola State Penitentiary the next week, signed in as a visitor, and sat across from Rick in the concrete room where men face the consequences of their choices. He looked smaller already, prison blues hanging off his shrinking frame, that sneer replaced with something closer to fear. "Why'd you come?" His voice was hollow, defeated. I leaned forward, making sure he saw Daddy's medal on my blazer. "To make sure you understand something. You thought stealing from a widow would be easy, that the daughter who left wouldn't care enough to come back. But you made one mistake, Rick. You forgot that I'm Malik Baptiste's daughter, and he taught me that family legacy isn't just about blood, it's about honor. It's about standing up when standing up costs you everything, and it's about making sure that small men who think they can take what isn't theirs learn exactly what happens when they try." I stood up, ready to leave, ready to go back to D.C. and my life, but I turned back one more time. Enjoy the next 10 years. Think about Daddy every single day. Think about the man whose house you tried to steal, whose medals you pawned, whose memory you tried to erase. He's the reason you're here, Rick. His legacy put you in that jumpsuit. I walked out into Louisiana sunshine, humidity wrapping around me like Mama's arms used to when I was small, and drove back to Pogger Street one last time before my flight. The house stood perfect in the afternoon light, periwinkle shutters gleaming, garden growing wild and beautiful, the sound of Mama humming gospel while she cooked red beans drifting through the open windows. Some legacies can't be sold, can't be stolen, can't be erased by small men with big entitlement, and I was living proof that Malik Baptiste's daughter knew exactly how to protect what was hers. If this journey resonated with you today, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know what part of the world you're repping. I need to know who's riding with me. Your words down there might be the exact spark someone needs to keep their fire burning when they feel like giving up. We share these truths so nobody has to feel like they're fighting in the dark alone. Stay woke, watch the company you keep, and never forget that your life is a reflection of the moves you choose to make. Stay solid, you feel me?